Well, thanks very much, Adam, and thank you to Matilda for the acknowledgement of country. I also join with Matilda in acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today and pay my respect to elders, past, present and emerging. Can I acknowledge as well Catherine King, the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, Regional Development, Local Government. Good title, I had it once. I found a better job, but it's a pretty good one. It's a pretty good one. To the local MPs, Anne Stanley and Mike Freelander, who've joined us here today. To Tu Lee, who, if anyone's in any doubt about her capacity to be an extraordinary representative of the future, it's the fact that she gave birth less than a week ago, and she's here with us today, the Labor candidate for Fowler. John Graham will be joining us as well. I want to acknowledge the mayors of Liverpool, Campbelltown and Penrith. Ned, good to see you. Good to be back in Liverpool once again. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you here today to talk about this new chapter in the story of Western Sydney, all of it driven by the airport that bears the name of a great Australian. Nancy Bird Walton was a woman of curiosity and extraordinary courage. What she saw in flight was the power to connect people and communities across our vast continent. She looked to a bigger, bolder future, and she blazed her own trail right into it. And this is such a fitting way to honour her contribution. As the beating heart of an entire economic ecosystem in the fastest growing part of New South Wales, Western Sydney International Nancy Bird Walton Airport represents so much of what is at the centre of my government's agenda, a future made in Australia. It is about ambition for our nation and optimism for all that we can achieve when we work together. It's about the confidence to take that vision of the future and build it into reality. And I want to pay tribute to the Western Sydney Dialogue and for the long role that they have played over a period of time in not just talking about issues and problems that need to be fixed, but being optimistic about Western Sydney and its place in this great country as well. And so to Brownie and Adam and to your team, I thank you for what you've contributed to regional economic policy in Australia. This is about creating jobs and it's about creating opportunities. It's building the skills that let us stand more firmly on our own feet as a nation in what is an uncertain world, and strengthening and connecting the communities that are the backbone of our country. Thanks to our nation's long record of achievement, the result of generations of Australians working together, we can look ahead to the better future within our reach, confident that we have what it takes to grasp it. For the community here and communities right across Australia, it is a future in which a forward-thinking and ambitious government has an important role to play, which is why we have so proudly played our role right here. We are a government with a vision for the future, but most importantly with a plan of how to build it. I stand before you proudly as a long-term advocate for Western Sydney Airport. In my very first speech to Parliament in 1996, I described the prevarication over building this airport as a sad example of decision-making on a short-term accounting basis without due regard for the long-term economic and social impact on people. As I've learned, patience is every bit as important as passion, but that doesn't mean waiting forever. And that's why the Australian Government has committed $5.3 billion to fully fund the development of Western Sydney International. Western Sydney International is a transformational infrastructure project that will drive economic activity for generations to come. It's injected over $500 million into the region through contracts awarded to Western Sydney businesses. It's supporting domestic manufacturers. The terminal roof alone, completed last year, is bolstered by more than 40 kilometres of Australian-made steel purlins and more than 3,500 tonnes of steelwork. 3,500 tonnes. It will provide long-term employment opportunities closer to home for people in the Western Sydney region. The construction of the airport has so far supported more than 11,000 direct jobs, many times more that indirect, unlocking opportunities for locals, including apprentices and trainees as part of the project. Within 5 years of the airport opening next year, the airport will support almost 28,000 jobs. Take a moment to consider that number. Every one of those jobs will make a difference to the individual, but importantly as well to a family, to a community, and to the businesses that they work for. And by creating job opportunities closer to home, it will spare many Western Sydney-siders long daily commutes, giving them back all those hours that can be much better spent with their families. Western Sydney International doesn't just befit Sydney's status as a global city, it enhances it. It will meet Sydney's growing aviation needs with an additional capacity for up to 10 million annual passengers and, of course, a boost to cargo. And it is a catalyst for the further urbanisation of Western Sydney, fulfilling the vision of Greater Sydney as a metropolis of 3 connected cities. As part of this catalyst, the Western Sydney Aerotropolis will drive innovation and jobs growth throughout Western Sydney. At the heart of it, Bradfield City Centre will house an advanced manufacturing readiness facility that will support manufacturing businesses in the region to thrive. Manufacturing is absolutely central to my government's agenda because it isn't just about making things, it's about making our economy more resilient and making our nation more self-reliant. However, I see more. A region growing as fast as this demands nothing less than an ambition to match. And in southwest Sydney, in suburbs like Bringelly, Oran Park, Leppington, Narellan and Macarthur, where the population is growing rapidly, that ambition has to include ensuring people can access new employment opportunities. Just as I've been a long advocate for a major airport in Western Sydney, I'm also a long-term supporter of extending the South West Rail line past Bradfield. That's why my government put additional funding into the South West Sydney Rail planning business case to include extending the line to the Macarthur region. I'm pleased to announce today that a re-elected Albanese government will build on this work, investing $1 billion to preserve land corridors to facilitate the building of future rail extensions from Bradfield to Leppington and Macarthur. This is the next practical step in safeguarding the future and ensuring we are well positioned to deliver the infrastructure that communities across South West Sydney need, to connect people with the jobs of the future and with each other. And connectivity is at the centre of it all. The other missing piece of the network is connecting St Mary's and Tallawong via Schofields and Marsden Park in the north. This is the bridge between the northwest and the southwest, two of the largest, growing and unconnected parts of the city. Completing the project would allow connections with local job opportunities in the Blacktown area and further afield to Norwest and Macquarie Park. These connections are critical to Western Sydney's economic and employment growth, and work is now underway on a business case for the Tallawong to St Mary's link, which the New South Wales Government is funding. This comes in addition to our joint commitment with the New South Wales Government to deliver $1 billion for 15th Avenue to create a critical transit corridor from Liverpool to the new Western Sydney International Airport. My government is also investing in the new Sydney Metro that will connect to Western Sydney Airport, the new M12 motorway to connect the airport to the motorway network. And since the 2022 election, my government has also invested in other transport infrastructure projects right across Western Sydney, including the Mamre Road Stage 2 upgrade, the Elizabeth Drive upgrade, and the Townsend Road and Burdekin Road upgrade. We also, of course, have our ongoing investment in the Moorebank Intermodal Interstate Rail Terminal, which is saving 3,000 truck journeys a day, especially on the M5, a project that began when I was the Infrastructure Minister that I got to open, with the little hiatus of 10 years in opposition in between. Sometimes infrastructure takes a while to be realised, but together, Moorebank Intermodal and Western Sydney Airport are the big game changer for this great global city. Together with Bradfield and the Aerotropolis, what they do is make sure that the city, which for so long has turned to the harbour and Sydney CBD, can look outwards, because that's where the economic opportunities are greatest. That's where the population growth is the strongest, and that's where my government intends to continue to concentrate in our second term, making sure that we seize the opportunities which are there. Now, as much as we've achieved as a country, this is certainly not the time to down tools and look back with admiration. This is a crucial time to keep working, to keep looking ahead and building a future worthy of Australia. We're working to deliver nationally significant infrastructure projects that increase productivity and resilience, improve livability and enhance sustainability. My government is doing the serious work of shaping the future rather than let it shape us, working with care, clarity and deliberation, listening to experts and engaging communities, and always prepared to work productively in partnership with local governments, state governments and with the private sector. That is an instinct that has done so much to define our approach to government. You can see it across Australia in so many ways. Last month in Melbourne, I committed the government to partner with Victoria to fund and build the much-needed rail link to Melbourne Airport. It says something about how advanced Western Sydney is, where we're talking here about extending the airport link in Western Sydney further to create that northwest to southwest linkage and right around that orbital link by rail as well as the orbital links by road. And in Melbourne, decades after Tullamarine became Melbourne's major airport, we're now getting on with, in our next term, advancing the need for a rail link to that airport. Not before time, but importantly, we, together with Jacinta Allen's government in Victoria, are going to get it done. We are also keeping Rex airborne, keeping regional Australia connected with the loan to keep Rex's vital regional routes operating until the end of June. We're working with the administrators and shortlisted bidders on what support the government can give to maximise the prospect of a second sale. But if that sale doesn't eventuate, we will, in consultation with relevant state governments, work on contingency options, which includes the possibility of Commonwealth acquisition. Access for those regional communities into capital cities is an absolutely vital network that provides not just the connections between economies but for health and other services as well. The idea that governments would just sit back and watch those communities be cut off from air transport is something, frankly, that some of the National Party representatives need to have a good look at themselves about whether they're fair income about representing regional communities if they think that it's okay for them to have no access into capital cities around the country. We do all this because my government believes that this is absolutely essential. That's why we've also made historic investments in regional airports, including in Whyalla, in Hobart Airport with the upgrade to the new runway and the international terminal facilities at Newcastle Airport. Together we understand that when you have a vast island continent like Australia, aviation is more important here by definition than any nation on Earth. We are the only island continent on Earth. We do not have land borders, and therefore that is the context of Western Sydney International Airport. That is why it will be such an important driver of growth in this region. Now, just as we're keeping things going in the air, we're keeping them going on the ground and indeed under the ground as well. We're finishing the NBN with another great Western Sydney rep in Michelle Rowland with fibre, not copper. It is the 21st century, not the 19th, delivering high-speed access and keeping it, importantly, in public hands so that it actually serves the public good. We're rewiring the nation with the investments needed to upgrade and extend our transmission capacity and give Australia a grid fit for the 21st century and our future as a renewable energy superpower. We're boosting the ability of households to take control of their own energy with rooftop solar and household batteries. We're investing in batteries, wind and solar generation at grid scale. And we're doing it now and with co-investment from the private sector. And we're still central to our self-reliance as a nation. We're supporting Australian steelmakers, not least in Whyalla, where we're working in partnership with the South Australian Government. At this stage, the US Government has not granted Australia, or any other nation for that matter, an exemption from their global tariffs on steel and aluminium. As I said yesterday, we consider this decision entirely unjustified, and we will keep working hard for a better outcome. But our government is prepared. We've been engaging directly with the Australian steel and aluminium industry and will continue to work through this with them. We have great confidence in the quality of what Australia produces and will continue to diversify markets for our products, which are in demand right around the globe. Our government will always stand up for Australian jobs and Australian industries. All Australians can join this effort and support our industries by taking the opportunity to buy Australian. The world has thrown a lot of challenges at Australia over the last 3 years. Because of the hard work that Australians have done together, our economy is turning the corner. Inflation is down, wages are up, interest rates are coming down, 1.15 million jobs have been created, and under our government indeed, Australia has maintained a faster rate of employment growth than any G7 nation. Fun fact, our government has presided over a lower unemployment figure than any government on average in the last 50 years. Unlike other advanced economies as well, we have had growth every single quarter, no negative quarters. None of this is a happy accident of good luck. It's powered by the choice that we made to invest here in Australia. Responsible economic management, delivering 2 budget surpluses, the first in 20 years that has occurred. It is about looking after people, though, while you're managing the books. It's about boosting wages and job security and funding the services families count on. And just as much as economic management is about taking care of the present, it is about meeting your responsibility to the future. This is the instinct that guides us every single day. And it's now why we can look back to what we've done with pride, but more importantly than that, it's why we can look forward to the future with growing optimism. Australians have been through testing times, but we're beginning to see the rewards and we're growing ever more confident about dealing with the challenges that remain. This is not a time to cut or wreck or aim low. It is a time to keep building, because building Australia's future is about all of us. We must seize the opportunities that this decade holds. We must actively plan for the future, anticipating it, shaping it piece by piece. This is the momentum that we have as a nation. This is the momentum that we cannot risk. What we see in Western Sydney is momentum that powerfully embodies that. What we see in Western Sydney International and all that it is already driving is the very power of aspiration that drives Australia. It is the ambition we must have for all of Australia. There is a better future that we're building together right now, and Western Sydney is proudly showing the way. Thanks very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. There must be a Prime Minister in the House. I'm up early and I'm wearing a tie, but apparently it's all the rage in the White House. You can't go without a tie. I don't know about the Lodge, but the White House, apparently the tie needs to be another 3 inches longer, I'm told too. One question I don't expect you to respond to deliberately, but on behalf of all of us, good luck with the crazy man-child in Washington, with whom you have to negotiate on all of our behalf. Prime Minister, firstly, thank you. Thank you for coming back again to Western Sydney. Ned Manoon said to me this morning, every time he comes to Liverpool, I get another $1 billion. So, and to you and your parliamentary colleagues that are with us, to the mayors that are with us, to the captains of industry and the people leading government agencies and small businesses, we all have a shared future, and we've probably never had a Prime Minister who gets Western Sydney like we have in you. So thank you again for the announcement today on MacArthur. Speaking of MacArthur, 50 years ago, Gough Whitlam and your hero, father figure Tom Uren, looked out and said, we've got state governments not able to match the growth aspiration of its booming suburbs. They stepped in and Gough sewered the western suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne, and he built Westmead Hospital with federal funding. And I think you, probably with Malcolm Turnbull for 5 minutes in the middle, and you are the Prime Ministers who most understood Canberra's role in helping states meet infrastructure costs. Peter Dutton's saying he'll give us water support as well, but he's saying it's ripping half of the housing fund out. Can you envisage a way where Canberra helps financially depleted state governments to help us both get the housing and the water pipes we need to enable housing?
Yeah, we're doing it right now. We've announced now 2 rounds of the housing support program. It's off and running. Every state and territory delivering funds for water, for energy connections, for if it's a road that's needed that opens up opportunities for housing, the conversion of existing housing or potential housing sites. There's been some when I was in WA and Queensland, we announced them with the infrastructure minister. So we have this program up and running, and we're not cutting anything to deliver it. It makes no sense to say, I'm going to stop and have less money for social housing, particularly in an area like Western Sydney, and we're going to do that whilst in order to fund something when a program's already there. As I said, 2 rounds, every state and territory benefiting, a 3rd round coming this year. We want to make sure that you get that infrastructure, because it makes no sense to hold back opportunities for increased housing. But you can't get increased housing if you're cutting the Housing Australia Future Fund, having blocked it. And there's no doubt if you've got a $600 billion nuclear reactor plan, that's going to not have a single dollar of private sector investment involved. That $600 billion is going to have to come from somewhere. So housing, the half, I confidently say it won't be half of it, it'll all go. The National Reconstruction Fund will go. Health urgent care clinics here in Western Sydney will go. Education, the increased schools funding that we've announced with New South Wales as well, to bring all the schools up to the school resourcing standard. That particularly benefits public schools here in Western Sydney. The money will have to come from somewhere. That's where it'll come from.
Speaking of Gough and Tom, back in the day, they made a bold promise. 50 years ago today announced the Macarthur Development Corporation, where the federal government, I think it was Wagga Wagga and Albury and
Albury-Wodonga, Orange.
And
Bathurst,
Orange. We're going to be the problem is every Prime Minister's let Campbell down since then. There must be a bit of personal pride today to step in and get that, because we can't have a Sydney where there's haves and have-nots. Places like the North Shore with a metro and places like Campbelltown and Liverpool without. We can't have another divide. And the new latte line is, do you have a metro station or you don't? We need metros everywhere. So.
Oh, absolutely. And a shout out to Mike Freelander and Anne Stanley for campaigning so strongly for this, together with Campbelltown Council over a long period of time have really been very, very strong in their advocacy. I'm a big fan of local government. That's no surprise to people here. I think that when you listen to local communities through local government, you get better outcomes.
You're going to convince the states to do the bit Leppington link and the...
Well, we'll be doing our bit to lead, and I'm sure that in Johnny Graham, but we'll wait and see who. I don't think they've made a final decision about Transport Minister, but we'll work cooperatively with the Minns government, which is what we do in order to get things done, and with local government as well. But there's a real opportunity for growth. I mean, one of the tragedies of some of the delays that have occurred in what we used to call Badgerys Creek Airport is that some of the development has meant it's more costly in terms of the corridors that needed to be preserved. That's why really up front this $1 billion is saying, okay, this is stage one, more money, more investment will be needed, but if you don't plan for it, if you don't get that right, then it ends up coming back to bite you, because you've got development in inappropriate places where if you get the infrastructure right first, then you can have your housing around with higher density around railway stations. Some of that can fund, of course, the infrastructure. So if you actually get that planning right, and local government's up for this, and the Minns government, to their great credit, speaking about higher densities around railway stations, around corridors. In my electorate, there's 1,200 dwellings going into a place near Wicks Park at Marrickville. The West Connects dive sites are going another 500 dwellings. I have some pushback on that. I stand up for increased density where it's appropriate, because that is what is absolutely needed in a growing city like this.
Should pay tribute to both Mike Murdoch, who's with us, and Kerry Schott from our Board of Patrons, and Mike, who ran the committee you asked me to represent you on, to chose the Badgerys Creek site. And some of us might always call it Badgerys Creek, like we call the other one Mascot. So, and Kerry Schott, who's just done a freight review for Western Sydney for the New South Wales government. So you're both keeping them busy well into their post-executive roles past, so good on you. A couple of fairly good questions, so let me hit you with another one. Very proud of our airport, and I know you've got to get to Perth soon, but imagine if you were just going to Badgerys. It'll be so much quicker by next election. We are, however, a little worried that we have a brand new airport opening, the first one in 100 years. This is on global scale. Big metro airports don't open every day. We were a little concerned that it had been officially designated a major gateway like Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, meaning we don't get the open skies advantage. And I pay tribute to Singapore Airlines and Qantas, who both committed already to Badgerys, but we need more airlines. Can we get some confidence that, I know there's some legal issues around the owners of Sydney Airport, and no one's done more to support Sydney Airport than me and you in the past, but we frankly can't have a situation where our brand new airport is not given at least a 10-year window to go and compete as a start-up and attract anybody who wants to come away from the bilaterals and get them there. Can we be confident toward that happening at some stage?
But we will have competition. That's in the interests of consumers. It's in the interests of people of Western Sydney, and indeed in the interests of Australians across the board. The reason why Qantas and Singapore have chosen to do the deal and come to Western Sydney early is because they're smart, first mover advantage. You have in the contract issues a 12-month period where because of competition they have to be on the level playing field, and that's been in place for some time as part of the sale. I argued very strongly for government ownership of Western Sydney Airport. You can get some things done from opposition when you're constructive and don't just say no to everything. And I advocated that because if you had Sydney Airport and Western Sydney Airport with the same ownership structures, it's pretty obvious that you could just bleed one of the assets effectively. You wouldn't get that competition and that engagement and that investment. Western Sydney Airport, this market here is bigger than Adelaide, bigger than Hobart, bigger than a range of the major cities around. Melbourne has one major airport, but Avalon I think will grow as a secondary airport there, servicing it. Brisbane has the Gold Coast, but nowhere has an airport that will be opened next year that has a market of 2.5 million people. And if you're coming to an area like this, of course you'd go straight out of Badgerys Creek Airport. On Saturday, my itinerary is pretty crazy at the moment.
It's about to get crazier, I think.
I'm dropping into, I can't get crazier. There's a limit. There's still only 24 hours a day, even in an election campaign. But on Saturday, I'm flying into Richmond Airport from Perth, and then I'll fly out of Richmond Airport into Melbourne. Just a lazy day, Perth, Sydney, and Melbourne on a Saturday. So it's a weekend, so you relax. You can do that, but most people can't fly into Richmond. They can't fly into anywhere in Western Sydney. Bankstown's not
most people don't have their own plane.
Airport. Well, there is that. Thank you, Royal Australian Air Force.
Or employ all the air traffic controllers.
So we make sure you can do it. It just shows the convenience of what you can achieve. And this economy is going to drive the national economy right here where we are now. And the greatest asset that is here in Western Sydney is the people in this room, is the human resources which are here. And if we get the infrastructure right, the sky's the limit, literally, and the airport is a major, major part of that.
I'll ask Chris questions on that, but firstly, can you also confirm, because Sydney Airport, some say, is wandering around town trying to get a curfew imposed on Badgerys Creek to level it up. Will you commit that our airport will remain curfew-free?
Well, of course, that's why it functions. And one of the benefits with the airport as well, with where the runways are pointing towards there in terms of the southwest, you can have a really effective airport. You can have noise amelioration so that there is minimal impact, and you need to do that. I live... my house in Marrickville, if it was at Western Sydney Airport, would be as part of the airport, literally. It is that close. And I support the airport because I support jobs and I support economic activity there. Sydney Airport's the largest employer in my electorate. And what will happen here in Western Sydney is that the airport, together with Moorebank Intermodal, together with the Aerotropolis, will just create good, secure, high-paid jobs that will drive the economy here in Western Sydney.
To the point. Last one to that, and we'll get you on a plane. Magnificence of the physical infrastructure product that you listed, plus the metro, the big ticket items that are game-changing enablers. And you and I have been doing the infrastructure game for a long time. I fear that we've allowed the debate to become solely a cargo cult on what's the next mega project, and forgotten what the base idea of infrastructure is to stimulate other economic investment. How do you, in a post-City Deal world, work with maybe Peter Malinauskas in Adelaide to put your submarine money into a South Australian economic strategy? How do you work with the new bloke in Queensland to put your money into the Brisbane Olympics to become an SEQ economic strategy? And how do you work with Chris Minns and the mayors in this room so that the billions you've poured into an airport, a metro link, a roads package and an Aerotropolis don't just become beautiful things to cut a ribbon on? How do we go that extra mile and drive an economic development strategy out of it deliberately, not just accidentally, that brings private money in? How do we curate that investment for the bit beyond?
Well, you've got to have structures, but you also have to have trust and a preparedness to work not just with the three levels of government, but importantly as well with the private sector. The best infrastructure projects are ones where for every dollar of investment, it creates multiples of that of economic activity. That's why we created Infrastructure Australia and that model to drive that change through. That's why projects like the airport, I've said for a long period of time, it's not about the runways. It's not about that. It's about what happens because the airport is there. Because the airport's there, it changes the way that freight occurs. Because the airport is there, it changes connectivity. Because the airport is there, you will have tech industries and advanced manufacturing establishing in the Aerotropolis in the region. Because of the links with the Moorebank intermodal, that is what will drive that change as well. So you have to always look for how does any investment produce a multiplier impact. And the key to that isn't actually about government dollars, it's about how do government dollars drive private sector dollars. Because it's the private sector that provides the engine room for growth. The public sector is a facilitator of that. And if you have that perspective, you will have enormous success. And then if you engage collaboratively, particularly with local government, but also state governments. We're working in South Australia, for example, the Whyalla stuff's all about an Upper Spencer Gulf strategy that is incredibly exciting for growth in that regional community. In Queensland, I was speaking with Premier Crisafulli last night about the Olympics. The Olympics has to be a driver of other economic activity and growth in southeast Queensland, but also regional Queensland as well. That's the perspective that you have to bring to it, and that's the perspective that we have in the collaborative work we're doing with the Minns government here in New South Wales as well.
In closing, Prime Minister, today was meant to be day 4 of the national election campaign. I just imagine it's day 4 of an even longer national election campaign. So thank you for your time. Thank you for bringing Catherine and the local MPs with you. I also want to do a shout out. If there's a tougher job in Australia than being Prime Minister, it's probably being Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. So to Tim Gartrell and the team that pulled you around and steered in the right direction, our thanks as well.
They're living the dream.
They are. Just ask them. That's what they always say. We are celebrating our 10th anniversary later this year, and suffice to say, you do have a federal election. I'm not so have such hubris to suggest that the goodwill of the people can be ignored. You go to the people, and my personal hope is you're still Prime Minister afterwards, but the punters will decide, and increasingly they'll decide in this area. Western Sydney's an onerous responsibility that we largely now help decide federal and state elections, and we take that responsibility seriously, and we appreciate your investment today. I might just say, if it is my last chance to welcome and speak to you as Prime Minister on a public stage, thank you for everything you've done. Good luck and Godspeed. There has not been a Prime Minister, with the small exception of golf for 5 minutes, a Prime Minister who has so invested, so understood the aspirations, growth, not only hard infrastructure but social amenity in Greater Western Sydney. And I think today's announcement is another investment in that plank. I want to formally give you the best of the West. I know there's some good Vietnamese restaurants in Marrickville, but there's some greater ones out in Fowler. They're right across the joint. So we'll send one down for each of you cabinet ministers. They can all swing through and grab a bite at a food truck or a restaurant. I saw Catherine just looking at it before, thinking, you know, next trip, look out and get across the place. But, mate, in all seriousness, thank you. Good luck. Godspeed. I think you'll do better in July than in May than my Eels will do all season. But thanks again for your time.
Not a big claim.
He's a tough room, isn't he?
Whoops, sorry.
No one likes a boaster, I'm just saying. Would you please thank collectively the 31st Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony
Thanks,
Albanese.
Brownie.